All right, we've got OC in Houston.
Hello.
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 Hello?
You're on the air. How
We
you
hear
doing?
you. We hear you.
Okay. I wanted to touch on the topic of evolution. I don't know if you guys are allowed to go into that too deeply.
No, we're not allowed to talk about that.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. We're allowed to talk about whatever we want. It's just that the issue of evolution isn't particularly relevant to whether or not there's a God.
I see.
But you're welcome to talk about it if you like.
Well, to tell you the truth, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to talk about, but could I pitch into the topic as to why we're allowed to start eating meat? Was that the last topic you guys were talking about?
I rather not. I think we've covered it in as much detail as we need to today. And you're a theist, right?
Yes.
So isn't your reason that we're allowed to eat meat because God says it's okay?
I was going to say that it's because we were given dominion over the planet, and we messed up.
Yeah, so God says it's okay. Yeah, sorry, but having a discussion about the morality of something when you're basing it on reality is difficult enough. When you bring in things that aren't necessarily real and appeals to Scripture, there's a reason why courtrooms don't allow spectral evidence anymore. There's a reason why scientific inquiry doesn't allow appeals to the supernatural, and it also doesn't allow appeals to your religious book. So saying that we were put here with dominion over the animals doesn't do anything at all to help us reach a reasonable conclusion about that. So instead, why don't you talk about evolution or whatever else it was you wanted to talk about?
Okay, I'll go ahead and say that I don't believe there's any sound evidence that evolution is real in the sense that a microbe can transmute into a adult human being.
So you deny that time is real?
I believe that time is real.
How old is the universe?
In my opinion, I'm not like the conventional theists who would say it's about 6,000 years old. I'd say it's much older than that.
How much?
But human history is probably, I'd say it's in the millions. But human history, as far as human age, I'd say that's in the realm of about 6,000 years.
What difference does human history have to do with it? You know, evolution applies to all life, not just humans, right? And by the way, if you think that life's been around for millions and human life's only been around for hundreds of thousands, aren't you talking about acknowledging that there's this huge time span, and then you're just saying, oh, that couldn't have prompted enough change in that amount of time to result in humans?
Oh no, I'm saying that that humans were created by, that everything was created. But
okay, now we're not talking about evolution. Now you're just making an assertion about creation. I thought when you were talking about evolution, you were denying the micro-macro distinction, which, by the way, I'm fine with, except that what your position is that little changes can't ever add up to big changes.
Yeah, that is true. I don't think there's any evidence for the little changes increasing and causing an increase in complexity.
What does increasing complexity have to do with it?
Well, in order to go from a microbe into a human being, you would have to, the cells have to become a lot more complex. They have to be added.
Do they?
Well, yeah.
Because, which has more genes, a human being or a tomato?
I'd say I'm not too sure about that.
Yeah.
I know the human genes.
But
genes are a lot more complicated because
they are, huh?
Well, I'd say.
Do you have any expertise in the study of evolution?
A little bit. I was a minor in biology, but that was a long time ago.
Okay. So when you were taught what science has to say about evolution, did you just say, nope, this isn't real? Or did you have some reason? Because this is not an issue about religion. There are plenty of theists and Christians, and even the Catholic Church is on board with evolution. And one of the more outspoken defenders at the Dover trial was a Catholic. The head of the Human Genome Project, who is an evangelical Christian, has said that based on the DNA evidence alone, you can confirm common ancestry, that evolution is essentially undeniable, and we know enough about what's happened that we were able to make predictions and go out and find transitional forms in the correct fossil layers. And what you seem to be saying is that just can't happen. And I'm wondering, where's your Nobel Prize?
Well, I believe evolution happens, but I believe that there's a little bit of confusion as to the terms.
I guarantee you we're in agreement there.
Yeah, because...
Do you know what the definition of evolution is?
I'm sorry?
You know what the definition of evolution is? Like change in allele frequency over time?
Yes.
Okay. So
yes, I believe that happens, but that only causes a change in, basically it only causes certain traits to become more magnified, to occur more frequently within a population. But there is a limit to what...
So it can't decrease traits in a population? It can only cause them to increase? If it can only cause them to increase... If it can only cause them to increase, aren't we moving towards more complexity? I mean, isn't everything you say kind of just refuting itself? It can't increase complexity, but it can increase. What?
No, it causes like traits that are already there, basically. It's not going to cause a trait to basically pop up from a really complex trait, a really complex series of traits that pop up from nothing, from nowhere.
Oh, so
yeah.
If we had, let's say, two people and they were both brunettes, we can't ever get to blondes?
Yes, you can. That one's going to occur by mutation.
Yeah.
But, for instance, those two people are going to remain people by the definition of what a person is.
Sure. So I agree that that's still people.
Yeah.
Now,
but for instance, they're not going to transmute into something that can't already be defined as a person.
No. See, that's the thing. Evolution doesn't say that somebody has offsprings that are of another species.
Right.
Offsprings
right, exactly.
are always.
It says
offsprings are the same species
over a very long time. Is what evolution says.
Yes.
What I'm saying is that there's a limit. Like no matter how much.
How do you know there? How do you know there's a limit?
Because all the experiments that I'm aware of.
Okay, go get aware of more experiments. You don't get to just argue. You don't get to, when I say, how do you know that there's a limit? And you just say, well, based on what I've seen, there must be a limit. That's not the way science is done.
I haven't seen any experiments that demonstrate there isn't a limit, is what I'm saying.
So when I tell you that you don't get to reference what experiments you haven't seen, your response is to reference experiments you haven't seen.
Oh, no, not exactly. But, like, for instance, like...
Yes, exactly. Rewind, listen to that last minute. That's exactly what happened.
Well, maybe so. Well,
so let me ask you this because let me ask you this because we're probably going to move on to another caller. If you are convinced that speciation and large changes can't occur over time, why are you calling an atheist podcast show instead of actual scientists?
I was afraid of that. I was afraid that was something you might not want to touch on for very long, in depth. Like, I don't know. Like I've never called the Atheist Experience before, but that was just, I couldn't think of anything else. That was just the first thing that came to mind. But I'll touch on that. Sure.
So go out and do the homework, then talk to scientists, and when you demonstrate that evolution can't do what it's already been demonstrated capable of doing, you'll get a Nobel Prize, and then we'll have you on as a guest. And this is where the world learned that evolution can't really do what we already know evolution can do.
Sure, but like for instance, one of the best examples they like to talk about when they're trying to prove that that there are no limitations. They like talking about fruit flies a lot, but most of the fruit flies that they use, the examples they use, they don't, like their mutations don't have any function. Like it's not gonna produce a species that's gonna.
Did you just say most of them don't have any function? What about the ones that do?
I said most of them.
Yeah, most of them. So
that's because
most is not an argument for not possible. You would have to say none of them, and you instead said most, which lets me know that you're aware that you're not correct.
I was just being diplomatic, sort of. But for instance, they like talking about the fruit flies and how.
Did I bring up fruit flies? Have you bothered to read evolutionary biologists? Is fruit flies all they reference?
Almost all of them like bringing up the example of fruit flies.
Yeah, you know what other examples they bring up? Are humans and the other great apes related?
Functionally, they're similar. I'd say they're similar.
Did modern apes and modern humans evolve from a common ancestor?
I don't believe they did. I believe they're similar for a reason.
Yeah, the fusing of chromosome 2 is the reason. Have you bothered to look up the fusing of chromosome 2?
I'm not too familiar with that one.
That's the problem. You haven't actually looked in. I mean, this is easy. Go to talkorigins.org. Actually read like Jerry Coyne's book on why evolution is true. And instead of just going, oh, they're only talking about fruit flies, try and actually get to the concepts and the data. I mean, even this is what I was mentioning. Francis Collins, who's an evangelical Christian who believes in Jesus because of a frozen waterfall, is a former head of the Human Genome Project, who recognizes that humans and modern apes have a common ancestor. And this isn't a problem for his religion. He's a good scientist. He actually knows and understands and studies this thing. It's not just like, oh, I got a minor in it some time ago and thought it was all BS. And then I haven't seen any experiments that prove me wrong. Maybe that's because you're not looking.
Well, the thing is, I believe that based on the evidence, based on what we see, seeing that there is a common answer is one interpretation, but there's just as much evidence to say that there's a common design.
That's a lie. You don't get to say there's just as much evidence while you just spent 15 minutes talking about all the things that you're not familiar with. And by the way, if you're right, you can demonstrate this, and you'll get the Nobel Prize, you'll change the foundations of science, and in the end, you still won't have done one damn thing to demonstrate that creationism is true. Because you can poke holes in scientific theories all day long, but if you have an alternate theory, you have to present positive evidence for that, not just poke holes in something else. And if all you're going to do is poke holes in something that you acknowledge that you don't understand and don't have enough expertise for, why are we talking to you? And why did you call an atheist podcast with two non-scientists, non-biologists, to talk about this? This is the thing. I understand why these ideas are compelling and convincing to people, because they've been taught a religious model, and then they get to learn a little bit more about reality. And they cannot give up the religious model, so now we've got to find a way to mash these two things together. Sometimes mashups are fun. Science and religion mashups, not fun, because all they do is dilute truth. Every single religious claim about facts of reality that can be confirmed as true was confirmed by scientific investigation and not religious assertion. Every religious claim about facts about reality that was debunked by scientific investigation and not religious assertions. The same is true for science. The only thing that fixes science is more science. The only thing, when has religion ever shown science to be wrong? Never. It's not a path to truth. It's not a path to understanding. And when you try to mash up fantasy and reality, you can get good TV shows, but you don't get good science.
Well, and it's really disingenuous to say, well, there's been no experiments that have shown these kinds of changes over periods of time. This is something that took hundreds of millions of years. Nobody has run an experiment that lasted hundreds of millions of years, because humans have a, 70, 80-year lifespan. It takes a long time per generation. That's why they do experiments on fruit flies, because they don't live very long. It's not because fruit flies are different and mutations are different with fruit flies. It's just, it's easier to study.
Yeah, the nice thing, though, is that the power of any scientific model is in the predictions that it makes. And in the case of the evolution, the theory of evolution by natural selection, by the way, evolution is a fact. The change in allele frequencies over time, speciation, these things are observed facts. It is the theory of evolution by means of natural selection that is the theory to explain the observations. That model makes predictions that allowed us to go out and dig and find Tiktaalik. Boom. That model makes predictions that says, you know what? If in fact human beings and other modern apes had a common ancestor, we should be able to find evidence for that. And then when we go and look at chromosome 2 and we see the fusing of the chromosome, boom. I don't know why I'm doing like ESPN things because I don't ever watch ESPN, but if you're going to call in and just say, oh, well, you know, I haven't seen evidence for evolution, then go out and look. Don't call an atheist show. Go out and study. I'm not the guy to talk to about this. I could probably get somebody who's an expert in this to explain it to you, but it's not the expert's job to go out and have one-on-one conversations with everybody if they've already published detailed tomes and been teaching students for decades. We're not here to do your homework for you. I will, on occasion, point you to like talkorigins.org or something along those lines.